On the night of November 14, 2025, Kyiv was transformed into a war zone. A massive onslaught of Russian drones and missiles struck the Ukrainian capital and its surrounding region, leaving fire, death, and destruction in its wake. Emergency crews scrambled through darkness, buildings burned, lives were lost, and across many of Kyiv's districts, the ground shook as if the city itself breathed in a nightmare. At around 2:30 a.m. local time, warning sirens blared across 8 of Kyiv's 10 districts. Sleep was shattered. People fled their homes. In a matter of minutes, the peaceful silence of the night turned into a fierce, terrifying barrage. According to Ukrainian officials, the assault included 430 drones and 18 missiles, launched in coordinated waves to overwhelm the city's air defenses. The first impact came hours later. Apartment blocks in several districts were hit, and fires erupted. Debris from exploded warheads rained down into yards and onto parked cars. Some vehicles were engulfed in flame. Smoke billowed into the sky as the scale of the attack became horrifyingly clear. Emergency response teams rushed in. Firefighters worked through the night to douse the blazes. In those early hours, they conducted dozens of rescue operations, pulling civilians out of burning high-rises, dragging them away from shattered windows, and carrying them to safety. In total, more than 40 people needed rescue, according to Ukrainian authorities. The human cost was devastating. At least 6 people died in Kyiv. The head of the city's military administration, Timur Kachenko, confirmed the toll. Dozens more were injured, including children, pregnant women, and elderly residents. Reports described collapsed balconies, twisted metal, and shattered glass strewn across sidewalks. The city's heating network was partially damaged, cutting off warmth to some northeastern neighborhoods just when winter's chill begins to bite. In the wider Kyiv region, the impact extended beyond the capital. Mykola Kalashnik, head of the regional military administration, reported that critical infrastructure was struck and private homes were damaged. A 55-year-old man in Bielets Tserkva was hospitalized with burns after a strike on a residential area. Multiple fires spread through the suburbs, destroying homes and igniting fear in communities that once felt untouched by frontline warfare. This was not just a military attack. It was an assault on civilian life, a deliberate escalation that left neighborhoods scarred and communities shaken. As reports of the devastation poured in, President Volodymyr Zelensky issued a forceful message to the world. He condemned the strike as wicked and called for urgent international pressure. In a public address, he warned that this escalation demanded more than just words. Only pressure, with sanctions and strength, can force Russia to end this war, he said. Zelensky also revealed that the assault included a mix of missile types, including ballistic and aeroballistic weapons. He emphasized that the main target was not purely military. Residential areas, heating networks, and civilian infrastructure had all been struck. By attacking the heart of Kyiv, Russia had sought to terrorize the population and test Ukraine's air defense resilience. But Ukraine did not remain passive. In the hours that followed, Kyiv's defenders counterstruck. Ukrainian long-range drones and missile units launched missions deep into Russian territory, targeting oil refineries, fuel depots, and pipeline infrastructure. These counterstrikes were not simply acts of retaliation. They were strategic moves aimed at crippling the financial lifeblood of Russia's war machine. Moscow, for its part, offered its own narrative. The Russian Defense Ministry said the strikes were high-precision attacks on energy production sites and weapons factories, intended to punish Ukraine's industrial capacity. But the scale and intensity of the bombardment raised serious questions. Was this truly precision warfare, or a calculated escalation that aimed to terrorize civilians? Russian authorities claimed they shot down 216 Ukrainian drones overnight over several regions, including Crimea. Still, Ukrainian officials and independent sources pointed to the broader picture. Russia's air barrage on Kyiv was not merely a counterattack, it was a message. Ukraine's response was not limited to symbolic or tactical targets. According to Ukrainian sources, one of the counterstrikes hit the port of Novorossiysk, a critical node in Russia's oil export network. At Novorossiysk, reports say Ukrainian unmanned systems struck an oil depot in the Sheskari's transshipment complex. Coastal infrastructure, loading piers, and pipeline units were hit, triggering a massive fire. Local authorities also reported that residential buildings near the port were damaged, and several crew members on a civilian vessel were injured when when debris fell onto their ship. Further sources stated that Ukraine targeted positions belonging to a S-300/S-400 air defense system in the region. If confirmed, this would represent a major escalation, Ukraine striking not just economic infrastructure, but Russia's own high-tier defensive systems. This confrontation shows how the nature of the war continues to evolve. 1. Drone saturation tactics. Russia has dramatically increased its use of kamikaze or suicide drones, launching them in massive waves to saturate defenses. 2. Energy warfare. Ukraine's counter-strike logic is clear. By hitting Russian oil infrastructure, it puts pressure directly on Moscow's ability to sustain its military operations. 3. Civilian vulnerability. Major urban centers like Kyiv remain in range, and residential districts are no longer collateral damage. They are often the target. 4. Asymmetric escalation. Ukraine, though militarily weaker in conventional terms, leverages drones and deep strike assets to punch above its weight. On the diplomatic front, the timing could not be worse for Moscow. European Union officials had recently intensified pressure on Ukraine to clamp down on corruption, particularly within its nuclear energy sector. Meanwhile, they reiterated their commitment to supporting Kyiv, signaling to Russia that economic isolation would only deepen if attacks like the November 14th barrage continued. Russia, for its part, has accused Ukraine of targeting civilian sites in its own counterstrikes, citing Ukraine's reported use of modified Neptune missiles aimed at non-military facilities deep inside Russian territory. The G7 has condemned the strike on Kyiv, labeling it a blatant attack on civilian infrastructure. The United States reaffirmed its support for Ukraine's air defense needs, suggesting that recent developments may influence upcoming aid decisions. At the same time, Canada imposed fresh sanctions targeting Russia's drone and energy production sectors, a move widely interpreted as a direct response to Moscow's escalatory tactics. For Ukraine, the November 14th strike is more than a military event, it's a turning point. Defense under strain. Kyiv's anti-drone and missile defenses are being tested like never before. While interception systems remain active, they struggle to handle the intensity and volume of modern swarm attacks. Economic retaliation. By striking Russia's energy infrastructure, Ukraine is not just defending, it is counterpunching. The goal: to reduce Russia's war economy income and pressure its ability to sustain operations. Political war. Attacks like these serve both as weapons and as statements. They force global leaders to choose, escalate support, or risk letting Moscow reassert dominance. Civilian consequences. The tragic loss of life and damage to homes will intensify domestic and international pressure on Ukraine to protect its citizens, but also heighten its resolve to prevent future strikes through stronger air defense. Beyond strategy and geopolitics lies the heartbreaking toll on ordinary people. Families huddled in shelters, children crying, mothers clutching babies as they flee the blasts. Firefighters climbing through smoke and flame, risking their lives to pull people from collapsing buildings. Elderly citizens who once walked peaceful city streets, now dragging luggage and pillows through rubble. People left without heating in cold November nights as power lines and heating infrastructure were struck. The constant sound of sirens, the unrelenting fear. The war is now very personal to millions. When Zelensky spoke after the attack, his tone was resolute. He didn't promise revenge. He didn't offer illusions. He demanded action, more systems, more interceptor missiles, more international support. His message to the West was unambiguous. Ukraine may bleed, but it will not break. It is not just fighting for territory. It is fighting for its very survival, its cities, its economy, its people. Looking forward, there are few certainties, but some trends are now unmistakable. Swarm drone attacks will likely become a staple in Russia's strategy. Ukraine's deep strike drone capability may put economic pressure on Moscow in ways that conventional warfare cannot. Support from Western allies will be more critical than ever, both for defense systems and the economic resilience to sustain prolonged fighting. Civilians will continue paying the highest price, and in this new era, entire cities have become front lines. The events of November 14, 2025 are a stark reminder that the war is evolving, not just geographically, but technologically, politically, and morally. Kyiv was hit hard, lives were lost, infrastructure was damaged, but Ukraine struck back. And in the ashes of this night, a new chapter of the war was written.